Mark Selby, CEO of Canada Nickel, advancing the Crawford Nickel Sulfide Project towards a construction decision in 2025 and unlocking the potential of the Timmins Nickel District, potentially the world's largest nickel sulfide resource.
Well, I could see it. In fact, nice sort of end to the year for you. Just saw the press release with regards to TTN now as another strategic investor and equity holder. What's the strategic significance of what you've announced?
Yeah, so to get one of the First Nations, key First Nations groups for us as an investor. And again, saw some of the responses online as the story broke on the weekend. They're using their own capital. This isn't sort of a government handout that's being repackaged as that. They're taking their money that they've got a whole series of businesses that they operate, and they're using those businesses to be able to raise the money to be able to make this investment, in us. I think, one of the key themes in terms of reconciliation in Canada, between First Nations and the country is really, number one, it has to be, a true economic reconciliation in terms of them being partners in terms of what happens in their territory. And most importantly, having a true seat at the table. And so, I think the most important thing with the investment, in addition to the money is they will have a board seat at the table. And so, to have a First Nations group who's using their capital to have a seat at the table, to control decisions around how the mine operates in terms of impact on the environment, all those things in terms of what's happening on their territory, we think is a major step forward, and hopefully will be a template that other communities can use in terms of how they interact with mining projects. In terms of strategic significance, I think, we've done a great job permitting, and we'll talk a bit about the other milestone that we've reached shortly. In terms of, permitting, helping, the visible support for the project like this is a huge help. Number two, in terms of going to other investment, groups, right? You've got a community, that's taken the piggy banks, basically smashed it open, taking a big chunk of that money in the piggy bank and giving it to us. So when we go to, the Ontario government, the federal government, other funding groups say, look at, this is a community that believes so much in this project. They're putting a substantial portion of their capital capacity, towards this investment. And you governments, it's time to step up, for those companies that we talk about in the Valley of Death. And again, we'll talk about the op-ed that was published today in terms of some of the struggles that companies have at this stage.
Right. Okay. So they've done the work. They've looked at how you're doing what you're doing. They look at what you've got and what the potential impact could be. And they said, yes, we're going to put $20 million, towards this. So, you've mentioned sort of some of the, I guess, I hate to call it risk mitigation, but it's like you need the social license. And we're seeing so many companies being held up, not just in Canada, but elsewhere in the world, if they don't get this social license. Does this kind of, punctuate that component of the risk mitigation process that you go through?
Yeah, I think this puts like a giant exclamation mark, in terms of that, social license, in terms of community and First Nation support. We filed our environmental impact statement a few weeks ago. It was accepted by the government. We are now on the clock for 365 days to a yes/no answer. And so, again, having this dramatic emphasis in terms of, yes, this is a project that the local First Nations and communities can get 100% behind. I think is invaluable. As you said, how many projects stumble at this stage.
Right. Okay. Obviously, let's look at the terms, okay? Because you've done it as a convert, which gives them, optionality, but it gives you the cash when you need it now. So, can you remind me of the terms?
Sure. So again, TTN's been an extremely, an excellent partner on so many levels. And I think in terms of creativity, for the people, just as a reminder, we signed an agreement with them, I think 4 years ago now, where they are going to build the transmission line that connects us to the grid, right? It's a business run by them. And that's going to provide that. We also signed an agreement around the mine haul fleet financing, where they basically will work with them to have them acquire the asset, and will effectively lease it from them, leveraging the combined set of favorable terms that are there. And then they approached us earlier this fall, and said, hey, we would like to be able to just deploy some capital, that we now have available. Let's have a discussion around, what would work. And we landed on a convert just because, from a First Nations perspective, it gives them downside protection in the fact that, it is a loan, right? We're paying an interest rate on it. Two, that interest rate helps create an income stream, for the community going forward, which is something that's there. And then still gives them lots of equity upside in terms of, as this unfolds, they're not here for a 10% increase in it. I think, they recognize we're just coming out of the bottom of the Lassonde curve here. That second, that's, that the valley of death, as it's referred to. And so, are really excited by the potential, as we move forward, towards a construction decision next year.
Yeah. And then, good terms for both sides as well. I think fair on both sides when you sort of look around at some of the convertible terms that are out there. So was that a long drawn out process, or did you get there fairly quickly?
We got there fairly quickly, in terms of the actual terms, like everything. This is the largest any sort of First Nations investment in a mining project that we've seen in Canada. This is and one of the very, one of a handful that have been done. So, it took a while to basically, they wanted to make sure the community was 100% behind it. And we were more than glad to have that time, because we want to have a strong, committed partner, and those discussions went well. And so, great to be able to end the year on this, super positive note.
Well, absolutely. Now, this has been done in the context of a very difficult market. I know you put this op-ed out, and I think maybe it might be time to kind of move through to that, because what I'm really focusing in is the ability that you've made to attract people like Anglo American, like Agnico Eagle, like Samsung, and now TTN coming aboard to fund what is a significant project. Early days, our conversations around, well, how does a small company fund $1 billion, $2 billion project? You've done that with strategics. Do you want to sort of tell us how the heck you did it in a market like this?
No, I think, at the end of the day, to be able to do, I think what we've done is, number one, you've got a project that, is world scale, right? This would be the Western world's largest nickel sulfide operation. Two, it's in a jurisdiction where you've got all the infrastructure in place. It's a safe jurisdiction. This is not Panama. No one is going to, confiscate this asset, or effectively fiscally confiscate this asset going forward. And then, three, in terms of the team, we've a bunch of us have come out of Inco. That was the world's biggest nickel company before China came along. And another big part of the team worked on the Dumont project back at RNC Minerals. And so we took that project from resource stage right through to fully permitted and construction ready. And so, when you look at, the quality of the asset, the quality of where that asset's located in the team, that really is makes it easy to attract the Anglo Americans, the Agnicos of the world. Again, having a top 5 mining company, if coming to the stories is a great endorsement. Having the largest mining company in Canada and our next door neighbor, make an investment in the company is a huge endorsement. Having Samsung SDI, in terms of needing nickel, for the energy transition, they want something that's clean, green. It's not all going to, and validating, it's quote, not all going to come from Indonesia, we think is a tremendous endorsement. And then today, with this TTN announcement, to say, this is a project that's not only quote accepted by the community, local communities and local First Nations, but hardly endorsed in terms of how we move forward.
Yeah, I can't help but think you're being slightly modest, because I hear what you're saying with regards to the kind of key drivers. But look, in a market which has raised less than 500 million, possibly even less than 400 million on the venture exchange this year, money's been hard to come by. And I've heard people make the claims that you made about, it's all about the team, it's about the asset, it's about the jurisdiction. They're not able to raise the capital. Is it because it's nickel? Is it because of the I guess the multi-decade component here? I mean, what actually got people over the line?
I think part of it is having relationships that have gone, I think a key part of it too, again, for me and members of our team, this is where you see board and management teams that have sadly hundreds of years of experience on some dimensions. But this is where that 100 years of experience, comes to play is, you've got relationships, you've got trust, with a number of people, who are in key positions today. And so, they've given that people may have known you for 10, 15, 20, 30 years in some cases, it again helps is that sort of added element there that you've got all the things on paper that make sense. And then there's a relationship and a trust, that really underpin that. And again, I think that comes through in terms of TTN. It's been a shorter relationship, but, we started day one, with a very much, we need your consent before we do anything, on your traditional territory. And when you approach First Nations with that fundamental premise, good things happen, right? I mean, we've been able, getting this impact statement done. We're the only mining project in Canada to file an impact statement, which completes the second stage of the permitting process since the law came into effect in 2019, right? Which is kind of a sad comment on where Canadian mining development is. But, that a big chunk of that happening was the investment early on in terms of, and that fundamental approach in terms of, how we work with First Nations group. And then that's allowed us to move very quickly, to this stage through the permitting process.
Right. But there's one group in there we haven't really talked about much in this conversation is obviously the role of government. Obviously, they have made some financing available, so they are supportive in that sense. But you think there's still a bit of a ways to go with regards to kind of the permitting process. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no, I mean, in terms of, permitting, we're into the final stages here. So that's good. And again, we've been able to move pretty quickly. It's more the financing piece here. The government, we've talked about, in terms of how to finance this project and the big chunks of money that are going to come from the government with programs that are already in place. Where they're really missing is this recognition, of this, valley of death that a lot of mining companies need to make it through. And the number you quoted there, which was in the Globe article a few weeks ago, the Venture Exchange as a total has raised $400 million this year. That's less than half the equity you would need to do one big project, right? And that's the entire TSX Venture mining sector. So, if we want lots of critical minerals projects, and the government say they do, this is not 2005, 2002 when in Canada we had Inco and Falconbridge and Rio Algam and Alcan and all these, big mid-tier base metal multi-commodity companies, that had the financing capacity and balance sheets to be able to do it. They're all gone. We're in a sector now where, just investments broadly, have moved away from actively managed funds to more passive and index funds. And guess what? There's a certain market cap cutoff before you even attract any kind of index funds. And there's no, in those ones, there's no bet on a team or the quality of the project or whatever. You just tick a few boxes and automatically you're in the index. Again, 15 years ago in this business, you'd spend a week marketing and you could raise all the money you need from a bunch of actively managed funds, pretty much, at any stage all the way through. Those days are long, long gone. And so, if governments want lots of mining projects to start being built, right, which is where the economic activity starts to happen, they're going to have to find ways to provide funding to do it. Because, we've got 4 strategic partners in. It's going to be tough to find room for another, 5th, 6th, and 7th at this point.
Right. So, but sticking with the government component, it's like you're saying that in terms of minerals tax credits or exploration incentives, and maybe there's a slightly broader conversation because you've rushed through the phases very, very quickly. Not rushed, you've advanced very, very quickly. But generically, we talk about that 400 million raised in 2024. It's kind of pathetic. Can government do more when it comes to the kind of removing the red tape and maybe implementing new types of funding available for companies should they qualify? Because I think that would be interesting to look at what more can they do, and in place how do they monitor or regulate that. And the other aspect is obviously where the finance guys are maybe playing games. We've talked about short selling, for instance. it's something which is really also hampering, the junior mining market. What do we do?
Oh no, 100%. I mean, the regulatory environment, we've I think talked about on some of the calls, that it's a wide open game right now for short sellers in Canada. We need to take our regulations up to at least where Australia is, to be able to help check that activity. And again, it's been basically, billions of dollars that have been confiscated from retail investors who invest in TSX venture companies and transferred that value to a bunch of hedge funds in Canada, North America, and around the world. And so, the thing is, I think we are getting some traction on that. So, hopefully we will see some measures on that, but it's going to take a while for the money to come back, even with those measures in place. And then two, in terms of, the capital, our project qualifies for over $600 million in federal refundable tax credits. The German government just put a program in place that wants to deploy $100 million per project. The French government wants to deploy money through a fund called Infravia. There's lots of money. Once we can get the project ready to finance, there's lots of capital available. We think there are some structures where government, again, it'll be in some extent one government program being taken out by another government program, but again, if they want to move companies to this position where they're ready to make an investment decision, they're going to have to get those programs in place, because the private markets just aren't stepping up, for a lot of commodities, given where current commodity prices are.
Right. Okay. Well, like I say, there's a lot more to do, and there's a lot more to be resolved when it comes to the kind of shorting component. I don't want it to be an excuse, but considering all the other pressures, it kind of stands out as something that needs to be addressed. What would your message be to, again, broadly, for investors of all categories? You sound like, look, give us a chance to support us, but with such value destruction in the past, maybe that's falling on deaf ears at the moment.
Well, I think, again, at the end of the day, I think, look for those projects that are getting those strategic investors. Those are ultimately the assets that those strategic investors, would want to own. Agnico just bought a gold operation adjacent to one of their operations, and paid a healthy premium for it. Yeah, you will see a development cycle emerge. The highest quality assets, will be and that value will surface. Again, going back into the nickel space to Noront, that was a company that traded along, at a, pretty low valuation, about 12 cents a share for an extended period of time. And then all of a sudden, BHP and Wyloo both decided they wanted, and that, that asset exited, in a 15-month bidding war that at $1.10, right? And again, I think that kind of value, that value potential is still there. And I think a development cycle is shortly around the corner. And I can tell you from discussions, with different levels of government, we really are seeing that kind of, we really are seeing government get, starting to pay some attention to this development phase. Because as I said, the reality is in Canada, we're the only large scale, we're the only mining project that's filed an environmental impact statement since 2019. So, and it's a pretty low threshold. I think it's about 5,000 tons a day of material that you have to move or process to be required to file an impact statement. So, that's not a huge project by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay, well, lots to even we can dive into that ad nauseum, perhaps when we hook up on our weekly energy show, battery show, I should say. But for today, let's stick with what you're up to. Obviously, so that's great news with TTN. In terms of what else is going on out there, Man West starting to shape up a bit.
This year has one of the big focuses, in addition to advancing Crawford, is really unlocking the potential of the overall Timmins district, which we think has the potential to be the world's largest nickel sulfide resource. So Man West there's Man, Central, West, and South. And West is really shaping up to be a great deposit. Mineralogically, the drilling that we've got, the early met work that we've done has all been excellent. And then we also announced a new discovery at Man South, Again, multiple large deposits. Man West is one of those ones, is looking like it, potentially could be a bigger, better Crawford, in addition to, what we've got at Reed, which is also, from the results from this summer, has been excellent. So, very, very glad on those fronts. And then since we last talked, had another follow-up high grade hit at Bannockburn. And again, with such a large nickel endowment, you don't need much of it to be remobilized, to end up creating some higher grade deposits. So, we'll stay tuned on that front as well.
We shall. Well, look, Mike, appreciate the update. I say great way to finish the year, and we hope to see more of the same next year, 2025.